Elon Musk is expected to be a significant voice in President Trump's second administration, but whether he's an official voice or not brings up many questions and concerns. And joining us now is Richard Briffault, Columbia Law School Joseph P. Chamberlain Professor of Legislation. Richard, it's good to see you. So listen, Musk did bet right on Trump's win. He seems to have impact. He seems to have influence. Of course, we know Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are going to be leading our new Department of Government Efficiency. Of course, this has raised, Richard, some questions about potential conflicts of interest for Musk. I'm curious how you're thinking through that dynamic.
Sure. I'm thinking about it in two ways. One is kind of formal legal considerations. And for that, a lot's going to turn on what exactly is the DOGE, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. There is no department. If there was going to be anything like a department in the sense of like a cabinet department, like the Defense Department, Congress would have to create it. And that's an elaborate process. So it's almost certainly not going to be a real department. If it becomes something more formal, like an advisory committee, and there's a law that governs them, they'd have to have public meetings, they'd have to keep public records, they'd have to be accessible to the public. We'd have a better sense of what they're doing. If it's just what it is right now, which is, I'd say, a couple of guys who have the ear of the president, apparently the trust of the incoming president, and a powerful megaphone, they surely could have a lot of influence. They could certainly have a big impact on what the president asks for and tells the bureaucracy to do. And they could use it in many ways that could be helpful to their personal interests, but they would be technically outside of a lot of the legal regulations designed to control conflicts of interest.
Would there be any recourse then, Richard, if indeed there were those conflicts of interest? Would it be, it sounds like legally there wouldn't be, would it then be up to folks in the press, for example, or, right. Who could possibly play that role?
As I said, if it's formalized somewhat, there would be some issues about things like making sure they have public meetings, keep records, keep the public up to date on what they're doing. But you're right. If it stays as informal as it is now, it's going to be up to the press, up to Congress, maybe the Democrats in Congress more than the Republicans, to highlight those actions that they're going to be proposing that may be to their personal benefit. I mean, Musk in particular has been entangled with a half dozen or more federal agencies. He's in contract with a bunch of them. He is being overseen and has in conflicts about it's with the SEC, with the Labor Board. There are environmental issues with some of his activities. So the things that he's proposing could potentially be things that may very well be good ideas generally, but could also have a direct personal benefit for him. Less clear on Ramaswamy's interests, but he also may have financial interests that could be affected by the kinds of policies that he and Musk are recommending. So in that sense, there's a potential for conflict, for real potential for that. And I think a lot of it's going to be the only real oversight on that is transparency and public attention to what they're doing and public understanding of what are the benefits of what they're calling for and what might be the personal benefits, personal to them, benefits of what they're calling for.
And just, Richard, just so I understand the process correctly, Congress would have to agree with Musk and Ramaswamy in order for their recommendations and suggestions to actually become law?
Some would, some would not. It really depends on what they're proposing. Deep cuts, elimination of certain programs, yes, Congress would have to would have to agree to that. Some other things might be more in the control of the president, might be more in terms of the directives that he gives to his agencies. Some of them might be things that the agencies could do by regulation, although even then the regulations would require a kind of process. There's not a lot that can be done just by say-so. There's going to be a process, either agency processes or Congress, but some things the president would be able to do, I think.
Well, and then there's sort of the intangibles as well, Richard. I mean, there was some reporting in the Wall Street Journal that Sam Altman of OpenAI, who Elon Musk sees as a rival, and that's become increasingly, the animosity there is ratcheted up, that Altman is having trouble getting an audience with people on the Trump team, and that's seen as a direct reflection of Musk's feelings towards him. But I guess those kinds of that kind of chemistry, if you will, and personalities, that can happen in any sort of administration. It's just you don't normally have somebody who has a company like Musk who's hanging around.
Right. It's not something it's something that's hard to regulate by law, but it is something that's worth paying attention to, that the idea that there's one or a very small number of people that has such enormous influence on the president and can steer policies. Steer policy about AI, for example, which is going to be huge. Policy about crypto, policy about internet regulation. All these areas in which these gentlemen have significant interests. The fact that they have that kind of influence is something can really warp the kinds of decisions that a president can make, the things the president can recommend to Congress, and I think that's what people have to look out for, to be aware of, and to be ready to respond to. I mean, I'm not saying that there will be these terrible things, and they may have some good ideas, but I think this is one of those things where the media, other interest groups have got to keep their ears open and their eyes open, and be willing to speak up.
So that's the bottom line then, Richard? It seems to be, is that what you're saying? Listen, if we're going to have Musk involved, and some would argue, I'm sure, he's the right guy to be involved. This is a, historic entrepreneur who has upended and redefined multiple industries. But your point being, if he is going to be involved, then let's make sure there is adequate disclosure as well along the way.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Okay. And know what they're saying, know who they're talking to, and to the extent we can, kind of, to put it, kind of crudely, know what it's in it for them. I mean, hopefully we'll see what's in it for the country as a whole, but also we should be aware of what may be particularly in it for them.
Richard, great to have you on the show today. Appreciate that insight, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.